You're listening to the Wonderfully Bookish podcast, where we talk about all things bookish and wonderful. You can find the notes for this episode and all of the others at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. So good to see you. Well, I can't see you, but you can hear me, so. I've got another interview today, which I actually recorded way back in November, and I honestly just completely forgot it even happened. I was thinking the other day, did I ever do an interview with this person? And then realised, yes, I did. It's already recorded. It's ready for me to upload. So here it finally is, only 4 or 5 months late. But, if you listen to my last episode where I just gave you a quick recap on what's been happening this year and why I took a huge hiatus, then you'll know why I've been so distracted. But if you haven't listened to that, then please do, because it kind of explains why this podcast seemed to have just disappeared off the face of the earth for 4 months. So today I'm going to be talking to Hollie, who is a book blogger at hollieblog.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. And Hollie is based in southwest England, and she mainly writes reviews on sci-fi and fantasy books. So I met Hollie a while back in Cardiff. A load of us kind of Wales and southwest bloggers all met in Cardiff. There must have been about 10, 15 of us all meeting in Waterstones Cafe, and it was such a great day. We need to do it again. And I met Hollie then. So in our chat, we talked about contemporary versus fantasy, which seems to be a great debate on this podcast, considering I'm a big contemporary fan and don't read much fantasy, while most people I seem to talk to are the other way around. So yeah, it's turning into a bit of a running thing here where we debate contemporary versus fantasy. I also asked Hollie about how she's an aspiring author, and we talk about how that's going, if going at all, which I totally relate to because I completed NaNoWriMo back in November, which might also have been why this podcast just slipped away into nothing, because NaNoWriMo kind of takes over your whole life. I completed that back in November, and I pretty much haven't touched my novel since. So I completely relate to wanting to be an author and just not. It just doesn't happen. So we have a quick chat about that, and then we also talked about how we both work so hard, but how hard work can kind of grind us down sometimes, and we both need to remember to step back and relax a bit. So I'm hoping that might kind of resonate with some of you, because I know a lot of us can kind of find ourselves working way too hard and we realise that we're just burning out a bit. So that was also a really great chat. If you agree with it, then head to the show notes page. If you go to wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast, click on the show notes for this episode, and you can leave a comment at the bottom and we can have a chat. So the question for this episode is, do you do the same? Are you somebody who just works way too hard and then collapses in a heap and doesn't want to move for 4 months, just like this podcast? Let me know and we can have a chat, try and build each other back up a bit. So yeah, I'll just get straight into it. I'll stop rambling, otherwise this will be 4 hours long, and let's get straight into the episode. So here's my chat with Hollie.
It's wonderfully bookish, whoa. All things books, let's start the show. Everything from classics to contemporary. Come and chat about books with me. If you're a reader of YA, grab a cuppa and just press play.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm a bit tired, but I'm good.
Sunday morning.
Sorry?
On this very dreary Sunday morning.
Oh, I know. It's horrible, isn't it? And when I was at work stuck in an office, it was beautiful, but now I have free time, it's awful. So yeah.
Typical. So I thought we could just kind of chat about blogging in general, like book blogging. Considering we're both book bloggers.
We are.
Yeah. and just kind of what books we love and things like that. So,
okay, great.
So what is your main genre that you love to read and review?
Yeah, so I love to read a whole bunch of different genres, but I find myself gravitated towards fantasy and high fantasy. So
Right.
that's usually if I'm looking for a new book to read, I'll just go to the fantasy section, or I'll go on Goodreads and look for fantasy mainly. But I do like other things too. I read contemporary, but I'm very picky. Whereas with fantasy, it's not a big deal. If it sounds fantastical, I'll give it a go. But with other things like contemporary or historical and things like that, I will be quite specific with what I want to read. So fantasy. That's my answer. Final answer.
I'm completely the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
like fantasy is like my is kind of the thing that I'm always a bit intimidated to read.
Okay.
And I don't know why. Like I've got most of my bookshelves, like probably 95% of my bookshelves are contemporary.
Really? That's
And
so
yeah,
interesting.
and I've got like the closest to fantasy that I get are like dystopian things like The Hunger Games and like Neal Shusterman and stuff.
Okay. I've
But
stopped reading things like that now, to be honest. I don't
yeah.
really read dystopian, but that's really interesting because a lot of other book bloggers that I know also love fantasy.
Yeah.
So when I hear people are like, "Oh, I just read contemporary," I'm like, "Huh, okay,"
Yeah.
which is great. I do love contemporary too, but so is there something that puts you off fantasy at all, or is it just not your thing?
Yeah, it's just not my thing. But the thing is, when I've read them, I really enjoy them, so I don't know what's wrong with me. Like the ones I've read, I've really enjoyed. But
Yeah.
then I'm still like, oh no, fantasy isn't my thing. So maybe I need to be less picky and start reading them more.
Maybe.
Like I really want to start reading Melinda Salisbury.
Oh, right. I have not read any Melinda Salisbury, so
Mm,
I can't say whether she's good or not.
yeah.
But where do you get your fantasy book recs from then? Just other bloggers or?
Yeah, mostly just other bloggers and like when I see people talking about them on Twitter
Mm,
and yeah, when I see people reviewing them and things, that's mostly where I get them from.
okay. So are they
Do you
usually?
have any recommendations?
Oh, yes. I have so many recommendations, and I feel like
Where to start?
yeah, I mean, I feel like because I read fantasy so much, there are a lot of books that I've read and loved that aren't very popular on
Right.
book Twitter and in the blogging world as well. Most
Hmm.
of them are, just because that's also where I get my recommendations from as well. But
Yeah.
because I sort of do a little deep dives and try and find books that people probably don't talk about that much.
Yeah.
Those have been some of my favourites. The really obvious ones are, Leigh Bardugo, V. Schwab.
Hmm.
Those are really obvious ones, and that
I own books by both of them actually.
you've what? Oh, you do. Have you read them?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't. Oh
No,
no.
I have A Darker Shade of Magic,
Yeah.
which I bought for Yalk last year because V.
Mm,
Schwab was at Yalk and I got it signed. Haven't read it
God.
yet. And like that's one that I've heard people say is incredible and they're just like, read it right now.
You should.
And then what's the Leigh Bardugo one? I can't remember which one I have of hers, but it's one I've had for ages because one of my friends gave it to me
Mm.
a
It's
couple of
probably
years
Six
ago.
of
I can't think
Crows.
which one it is now.
I feel like it'll be Six of Crows because I feel
It's
like
not
those are
Six of
more. Oh,
Crows.
it's not. Oh.
No. I'm trying to look on my shelf and remember which one it is, but I can't see it on my shelf now either.
Oh.
Oh, hang on. I can see it. I can see a name. I have a Dobby pop vinyl standing in the way of it.
Oh.
Shadow and Bone, that's what it is.
Okay. That's a really good book. I feel like people enjoy Six of Crows more, but
Yeah, I've seen even a couple of people that I've talked to for the podcast, when I've asked like what books they really like, people always dive on Six of Crows.
yeah. Yeah, I get that. They are pretty incredible books, but I do love Shadow and Bone and the Grish trilogy as well.
Yeah.
But they are they're not as popular.
Mm.
But I loved them. I bought them years ago.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to say, oh, before they were popular, because they were popular, probably in America, but maybe not so much here.
Yeah.
It was Six of Crows that really kicked off Leigh Bardugo's fame here, I think. So,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I would give Shadow and Bone a go, and definitely A Darker Shade of Magic, because A Darker Shade of Magic isn't very big. I'm looking at it now;
Yeah.
it's quite small. So you could,
Yeah, and I've seen people say as well that it's good as like a starting point for people who aren't that big on fantasy, because it's not like massively heavy fantasy.
no, that's true. Yeah, it's set in a very, it feels quite historical actually. It's set
Yeah.
in what I pictured as quite Victorian London-ish
Right.
with magic, but the
Mm.
way the way V. Schwab writes magic is very, it's quite subtle, and it has
Yeah.
rules, and it's not like, I can't really think of a example now, but it, not like they don't have, without shit, I'm not, don't want to drag Harry Potter, but they don't
Yeah.
have they don't have magic wands, and they don't say magic words, and it's not like
Yeah.
things are floating or they're magicking people dead or whatever.
Yeah.
It's very subtle magic,
Right.
and she does that throughout her books as well, in Vicious as well, and in the Savage Song. But A Darker Shade of Magic is more fantasy than they are. Like, I think
Right.
this Savage Song is more science fiction, and
Okay.
Vicious is contemporary. It's kind of like X-Men, where it's set in the contemporary, but they have powers.
Right.
So A Darker Shade of Magic, oh yes, I would consider it, yeah, quite entry
Yeah.
level, but feels adult-ish, historical, but
Yeah.
definitely give it a
Cool.
go. So,
I will. I'll have to add it to my list. I've got like a list of books that I need to read. Like I've got
oh,
one that I still need to read for an author coming on the podcast soon,
oh
and I
yeah,
still haven't read her latest book, so I'm like furiously trying to finish because I'm reading The Hate You Give at the moment,
okay, that's a really good
and
book.
I've been reading it for so long,
Oh,
and I keep getting distracted. Um and obviously now that the film's out, I really want to try and finish the book as quick as I can so I can go and see the film.
yeah, yeah. I
Um
I do. So when I said there's not many contemporaries that I read, and I'm very picky, The Hate You Give
yeah.
isn't one. Like, I've read that and I love that. So that's
I
definitely,
feel like
yeah,
it's one of those books that everyone needs to read.
yeah, absolutely.
It's just really, so kind of the themes in it are so prominent,
Mm.
right? Like, especially now that it's one of those books that I'm just like, everybody needs to read this. I don't even care how old you are, read this book.
Yeah, that's very true. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, it's sad and real, and
Yeah.
sometimes I know that a lot of people, when they, and me included, when I want to read a book, sometimes I don't gravitate towards books that are too poignant, because I think, well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get away, I'm trying to escape. I don't really want to be reminded of the
Yeah.
horribleness of the world.
Uh-huh.
But with this one, I thought, no, I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like 3/4 of the way through it now. So I'm almost done. I might finish it like later today. So
Do it. That'd be lovely.
yeah. So on your blog,
Hmm.
I saw that you're in the middle of writing a book and you're kind of an aspiring author.
Oh, yeah.
How, how's that going?
uh, is it going? Well, so I haven't written anything in a really long time, just
Yeah.
because I've been really working on my blog, and I've been working. I've
Yeah.
been unemployed for a really long time, and I've recently just got a job, and that's full time, and I feel like I live there, and
Yeah.
so I haven't found any time to write, which is sad. Um,
Hmm.
but I am working on, well, two, that are very different from each other, and I do go back and forth with which one do I want to write today. Um, and because they're quite different, sometimes I feel, if one of them was to get published, would I be able to publish the other one, just because, will I be known as a fantasy writer or a sci-fi writer or
Right.
a
Yeah.
contemporary writer? Um, and I think, would I be able to do that? But there have been more authors recently being able to write contemporary and then publish a fantasy, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's not been much of a worry anymore. But yeah, I haven't really been. It's so sad. Like I just my job is very creative, and I write stuff 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So when I come home, I don't really want to be creative. I just want to watch Netflix.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same with mine. Like a lot of mine is kind of creative stuff, and I mean a lot of it is also very tedious things, but when I kind of have a whole day of working, and because I work from home as well, once I finish all my work for the day and then I have to kind of sit down to write, I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered now. I've been sitting at my computer all day.
Yeah.
Do I really want to sit here for like another hour or something and write when it's literally what I've been doing all day?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I kind of get that struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to work from home. That would be incredible, because I have, well, depending on traffic, about an hour's commute
Yeah.
there and back. And the environment I work in is not, I can't really explain it. So there's two offices. There's one office down the corridor, which is for the people doing the creative jobs like mine.
Yeah.
And then the other office is an open plan events and sales office. So it's
Right.
very loud. There's music, there's phones going off.
God, yeah.
And because I'm the newest person there wasn't enough space for me to be in the creative office where it's quiet. Yeah. So I find it really hard. So I'm surrounded by noise all day, staring at screens. And then I'm on a bus for 2 hours a day. So
Ugh.
yeah, so when I come home, I'm just drained.
Yeah.
And so I haven't been, I mean, even though obviously when I come home, I try and set up a really nice environment for myself to maybe get creative or just get comfy. But most of the time writing doesn't come into that, which is such a shame because
Yeah.
I really love it, but I just need to get it back into my life. But at the moment it's just I just can't be bothered, and it's just fallen to the wayside, so which is a real shame.
Yeah, I've been like that for ages, but kind of with everything, like with the blog and the podcast and everything. Like I've just gone 2 weeks without posting any podcast episodes. So
Wow.
I'm kind of like I need to get my butt back into gear. And then like I kind of go through phases of not posting anything on the blog for ages.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been the same with writing, where I think it was mostly because I didn't have a solid like idea down. Like I didn't really have a good plan of what I wanted to write, so I was just kind of flailing because I didn't have have anything to write about.
Yeah.
But now, like where I'm doing NaNoWriMo this month,
Yeah.
it's kind of forcing me to spend time on it. And now, like, it's only the 4th now, and like over the past 3 days, I've already written like 10,000 words.
Woo! Congratulations! That's so good. That's so good. Yeah.
So I think Nano has kind of just been the kick that I need to get back into it. But yeah, otherwise, if I don't have, I know I'll hit December and I'm not going to touch it again. Like,
yeah, maybe.
I'm going to kind of, because I don't have this deadline, I know I'm just going to kind of leave it to the wayside again, and I just won't come back to it for ages. I'll probably come back to it next November for the next NaNoWriMo.
Well, to be honest, after Nano, I always give it a rest and don't look at it for about a month or two, because then when I go back, I can be like, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of writing it, you're like, yep, this is solid. I don't need to go over this at all. So sometimes, you know, and especially because it finishes at the beginning of Christmas, that's a good time to just not open that file until January maybe. So I think that would be okay if you were like, I'm just not going to look at it now. But I know what you mean about deadlines. If there's no deadline for me, I'm like, well, I can just hold it off for the rest of my life, I guess. So
most of my job is kind of setting our own deadlines. which I kind of, if someone gives me a deadline, because like I work with so many different clients and they just give me they just give us so many random things to do. Like we could be doing something completely different every day.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, they just kind of give us this task they want us to do and we just go away and do it. So it's mostly kind of setting our own deadlines. And I have to make myself think, right, I need to do this today because it's an actual client's work that I need to get done. It's not just like my own writing. It's not a blog post. It's actually somebody else who's like paying for me to do this work.
Yeah.
And I have to sit and force myself to actually do it on time because I'm like, right, look, I know there's not like a strict deadline, but do it. And I struggle so much when there's no kind of concrete deadline.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. I mean, with my work, I was hired in September and my contract is going to end mid-December. And I was given a giant spreadsheet and they were like, right, do all this. You have till December. Yeah. And sometimes they add things to it, especially because a few days ago I'd done about 70% of it and I thought, oh my god, it's not even November and I've almost finished everything. They're gonna be like, okay, we have no use for you now, bye, and just make me redundant. Not
ideal.
Yeah, so for me, I've been going, right, how many so I write activity pages for corporate away days, just for a bit of context, as well as destination pages if they just want to go visit a city in the UK, basically.
Right.
I say to myself, right, how many activities am I going to write today? Am I going to write 8 or am I going to write very detailed destination pages? So would I only write 5 pages rather than have to get through as many as possible? Because I did that. I did that at the beginning, and then I was starting to run out of work to do.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been setting my own deadlines as well. For my employer, it's just as long as you get it all done by the time you leave, then we're happy.
Yeah.
We don't mind how you work, how you do it, what things you write on certain days, as long as you're getting it done. Which is the freedom's really nice. But I'm still trying to figure out my own deadlines just so that I have work, but throughout my contract, but also I get it all done by the time I leave, because I don't know if they would extend my contract or they just say, well, thanks, you've left us all this work to do, we've got to finish it. So I wouldn't know how that would go, to be honest.
Yeah. I wish as well that maybe I should set myself deadlines, but when it comes to reviewing books for the blog, like I kind of wish that I had deadlines for finishing those books too, because otherwise I will leave them there for like 2 months and then I'll get distracted and like pick up another one and start reading that, and then like it just takes me so long to get through them. So I feel like even with blogging, I need to set myself like firm deadlines and be like, right, by this date, I'm going to have this book finished. And then I want to put the review up by this date. But then there's also the thing of, will that just stress me out too much and make me hate blogging?
No, I get that. I mean, I don't have any deadlines for blogging, which is kind of weird because I work well with deadlines too. But I try to have 2 blog posts go up a week, and one is always a review, and one is a thought piece about something else. Basically, it can be book related or not. It doesn't matter. But when I was unemployed, I read so quickly and so much that I had all my reviews scheduled about 4 weeks in advance. Now I'm writing them and posting them the next day. So, but to be honest, now that I'm a slower reader, just because I don't really have time to read, I just find time in little in between spaces. So on the bus, on my lunch break.
Lunch breaks are big for me as well, and just kind of like grabbing a book. Like I'll move away from my desk, I'll go and sit in another room and just like make sure I read for like 20 minutes in my lunch break.
That's so nice, isn't it? It's hard to do, I think. Even just a simple thing, just like reading a few chapters while you have quite a hectic life is really hard, but I always try and make time for it because it's just something I really enjoy. And I feel like, I don't know, obviously when I was at university, I had deadlines for reading. They were like, you need to read half of this book by however, before we then talk about it. And that was quite hard. I remember I had to read Girl with a Pearl Earring over one weekend.
Oh God.
Because I know, because it arrived the Friday and we would be discussing it on the Monday. So I just locked myself in my room, declined all invites and just read it. But for me, that was really stressful. I didn't enjoy reading it because I was too stressed about it, because I was like, I've got to get it finished. I don't care if I hate it. I don't care if I'm skipping over words. So I wasn't really taking the story in.
Yeah, I guess I've done that for when I'm on blog tours. Like sometimes I'll, like if I'm really busy and I know I've got this blog tour coming up, I will leave it until like the last weekend before the post is due up. And I regret it every single time, but I never learn from it.
Is that because you're not enjoying the book, or you thought, because I know sometimes not me, I don't think I haven't been on many blog tours, but I've spoken to other bloggers, and it's because they've agreed to do it and then they've started to read it and gone, I don't like this, but I don't want to go through the awkwardness of explaining I don't want to be on the blog tour because I don't like it, so they just read it. Really?
Yeah, I've definitely done that before. I think it's only once that I've actually contacted the organizer of the tour and just said, look, I have read like one chapter and I can't get into it at all. It was really like the way I can't even remember which book it is now, but it was just written really strangely, where it was like all the sentences were really sharp and short. Like there were some sentences that were like 3 words, and like in one paragraph you'd get like 10 full stops because all the sentences were so snappy and short. And then all the dialogue didn't have it, like wasn't on its own line.
Okay.
Like when there was a conversation, all the dialogue would be in one big paragraph, like no matter who was speaking. So it would be like one massive run-on paragraph. And like I don't know if it was intentional. Obviously it must have been intentional for like the style this author was going for, but I just found it so weird. It was like the weirdest like format that I've read, and I just couldn't even get on with it. I read like one chapter and I was like, I don't even know what's going on. I don't know who's speaking when. And that's the only time I actually contacted the organizer and just said, look, I'm really struggling with this. I can't do it. And I think she gave me like a guest post or like an excerpt or something. But yeah, I think most of the time it's literally just down to me forgetting that I have a blog tour. And I'll just look at my calendar and be like, oh no, I'm supposed to review this book in 3 days and I haven't even downloaded it.
Well, actually, I was going to ask, that book that you read, was that a ebook? Because sometimes if I'm reading a book on NetGalley, the formatting isn't correct, so it's not meant to look like that, but it ends up being like that.
Yeah, no, I think it was an actual physical book.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, no. I ended up giving it away, I think. Like, I think I just put it in like a big pile of stuff I was giving away on Twitter or something, and I'm sure someone took it.
Oh, poor them.
But, yeah. But yeah, it was really weird. Like, I'm up for reading books that the style is completely different. Like, I'm up for trying new things. Like, Sarah Crossan is one of my favourite authors, and she's, like, the only person I can think of who writes in the style that she writes. Like, have you read anything by Sarah Crossan?
I think so. Is Sarah Crossan the author of, is it One? About the conjoined twins?
Yeah, that's her.
Yeah, so I've read that one, and I get what you mean. It's kind of like, what's that word? It's a form of poetry.
Yeah. And like I love her books. Like I think I've read nearly all of her books. So I'm like, I love reading styles that I'm not used to, but yeah, that one was just weird. I just couldn't get on with it.
Yeah. Or the speech. So the dialogue was in all like one paragraph and multiple.
And it would just kind of like all the dialogue tags were on it, so it would just say like what they're saying and then like said someone, and then the next person's speech would just carry on the same line, like it didn't go on to the next line.
That's so strange.
And then if it didn't have dialogue tags at the end, so if it was just like the dialogue they were saying without who was saying it, I was completely lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very weird.
That does sound weird. It would be hilarious if you told me and I'd be like, oh, I've read that one, because
that's my favourite book.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that would put me off too. I can't. I've read ebooks in the past that have done that have been not final. So like from NetGalley, and I've just given them benefit of the doubt because I know that's not how the final book is going to look. And sometimes it's confused me a little bit, but I've gotten over it. Just because in my mind I'm like, that's not how it's supposed to be. But with something like that,
yeah, I feel like you can't really include it in a review because it's not like the author's fault that it's happened, so you just have to try and get past it and read it for the story.
That's exactly what, I don't bring it up if I know it's not so the same with spelling mistakes or grammatical errors. If I've read those in a proof or an arc, I won't bring them up because I'm like, they must know. But I have read books in the past where they have got all those mistakes and it's a final copy, and so I have brought it up. But when it comes to e-arcs especially, sometimes it's just because the formatting is terrible and maybe it doesn't fit this, the dimensions of my Kindle. Because I've read some of my favourite books in that form, and it has hindered it a little bit. But I just have to say, I just say to myself, look, that's not what it's going to look like. It's just accidental, and as long as it's not too bad, then I should be able to enjoy it anyway. So because when I read Nevernight a few years ago, that's one of my favourite books now. But the formatting on that arc was a struggle. Because there's footnotes in Nevernight as well, and I've seen people. I need to read it, but I've seen people. It's fantastic, even because you don't have to read the footnotes, but they do add a little something extra. But they had the footnotes in the E arc as well, and I struggled a little bit, just because the way it was spaced, it looked like it was a part of the main text, even though it isn't. In the physical book, you can see it's clearly a footnote. So I struggled a bit, but it didn't take away from how amazing the book is. So that's But I feel like if it was in a physical book, like your experience, that would throw me off quite a bit.
Talking about books in like different formats. One book I couldn't deal with, like as an audiobook, I started listening to Illuminate.
Oh, really? Okay.
As an audiobook, and I couldn't get on with it at all. Like, people were saying that they love the audio, but then I think people who have listened to the audio of it have already read the book, and I was listening to it for the first time. I think it was like one of the deals they've got where it's like $1.99 or something to buy it. So I did that before I bought the book, and I couldn't get on with that at all. Because have you read Illuminate?
No, I haven't. I really want to though. I've also never listened to an audiobook.
The way that it's all structured is like with different files, and there's kind of transcripts from interviews, and then there's like posters and like pictures of people who have died or gone missing or stuff. There's like, it's like a whole massive file, like kind of like an investigation file. And the audiobook, like, it's cool how they've done it because they've got a whole cast of people and they all read different bits, but I just find it so confusing because I was like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's what. And then as soon as I bought the book and read it, I kind of understood what I was listening to a bit more. But yeah, that's another one that's really confusing, I think, in any format that isn't like the actual physical book. I can't imagine what it would be like as an ebook. I feel like an ebook would completely kind of destroy
it. I've never listened to an audiobook before, just because when I've thought about it, they're so expensive. So I've thought, no, I don't need to do that. And sometimes if I've listened to,
Yeah.
I used to listen to Welcome to Night Vale, and I loved it, but
Yeah.
sometimes I would miss bits because I was doing other things. Because I feel like with an audiobook, you don't have to sit there
Mm-hmm.
and just not do anything and just listen. You
Yeah.
can do other things, but then I forget that I'm listening, and my hearing
Yeah.
tunes out the podcast. So I don't really listen to audiobooks. But for something like that,
Yeah.
I know how Illuminae's how it's written. That I feel like that would be quite
Yeah.
difficult. I feel like with just prose,
Yeah.
maybe audiobooks wouldn't they be okay actually?
Yeah. Yeah, I've listened to audiobooks a
Oh,
lot. Like I
cool.
listened to them as a kid as well. Like when I used to go to the library and they would have loads at the library, you can just like take all the CDs home
Oh,
with you and just like listen to them on CD. Um, so yeah, audiobooks have kind of always been a massive thing, and like my mum's into them as well, and like
oh,
we all
that's so
have Audible
sweet.
subscriptions. Yeah, so like my mum, like I have my mum's Audible password, and I just kind of go on
Yeah,
and listen to some of the ones that my mum has bought. Um, and then like if my mum's interested in any that I've got,
yeah,
then she'll just kind of come on and listen to mine. But yeah, so I'm kind of used to them. I listen to them a lot, but at the moment I struggle so much. Like I've been listening to the same one now for months because I get hardly any time to actually put it on. Like I can't put it on while I'm working
yeah.
because I just can't listen to something and work at the same time. So I tend to only put it on like when I'm washing up or cooking or something, and then that's 20 minutes and then it's done. And it's kind of like I've
Yeah.
got hardly any time to actually sit down and listen to them. But yeah, I do enjoy them. Like I think it all depends on the narrator and how good the narrator is as well. Like some of my favorite books I've listened to first as an audiobook and then gone out and bought the physical book
Okay.
because I love
Yeah,
the audiobook so
I
much.
feel like they'd be good for if I do read on public transport, it has to be either a really smooth journey or I'm in
Yeah.
traffic. Because if so my commute to work is down country lanes, and if I just can't look down at a book and read that way. So I feel like an audiobook
Yeah.
would be good for
Uh-huh.
times like that where, I have an hour commute, but I can't look down at a book. I have to stare out the window. So an
Mhm.
audiobook probably would be
Yeah.
a good alternative in that respect. So I really want to give one a
Yeah.
go. Do you recommend any?
Well, my favorite book ever, I think I've pretty much mentioned it on every single episode of this podcast
Really?
so far. Um, People are just going to be like having a bingo sheet like every time I mention it. But Challenger Deep by Neal Shusterman,
Okay. Okay.
my favorite book ever, and that was the one that I listened to as an audiobook first before I bought
Hmm.
the book, and I kind of just completely fell in love with it even just from the audiobook. Like the narrator is amazing. Like he does so many different voices and accents and all sorts. And it's kind of a weird book
Hmm.
to follow, but yeah, I definitely recommend that one. It's amazing. And I also listen to everything's just Neal Shusterman, but I also listen to Scythe and Thunderhead.
Yeah, I was going to mention those because I've only heard of Neal Shusterman through those books. So I haven't heard of Challenger Deep, but
Yeah,
I'm just looking it up now. Yeah.
it's so good. It's all to do with like mental health, and like it's about this boy who has it's not really mentioned what mental health condition that he has, but it's like people who have like looked into it and reviewed it and stuff have said that it's close to probably like schizophrenia.
Okay.
So, and it's kind of the book kind of switches between his real kind of everyday life and then this whole world that's inside his head,
Oh, wow.
and characters that, and like in his head he's kind of on this pirate ship heading towards the Marianas Trench,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's really cool. Like you kind of see, as it goes on, you kind of see characters from his real life appear kind of like as caricatures in this boat in
Yeah.
his head. It's really cool. Like it's a really good way to kind of show mental health. So yeah, it's really good.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll probably give that a go. And that sounds like I said, I know that I'm not big on contemporary, but the what but it sounds
Yeah.
like something I would like.
Yeah, like the bits on the boat are kind of they are almost like fantasy elements. Like it's kind of switches between like contemporary, so like his everyday life, and then the bits on the boat are like proper fantasy. Like there's
Yeah.
pirates and there's like a parrot plays a big part in it, and yeah, so that's amazing. I would definitely recommend
Okay,
that.
great. Thanks. I'm definitely gonna read that. That sounds really good.
Yeah, and Scythe and Thunderhead are
I've
amazing
heard of
as well.
those, yeah.
They're really
I've
good.
been meaning to pick up Scythe. I wasn't sure if it was my thing, but the way people talk about it.
It is amazing, and kind of be prepared for massive cliffhangers.
Oh, that's all right. I love them.
Yeah, especially the second book. Like the third one, I think he's still
Okay.
writing. So it's going to be ages yet until it comes out, and the second book ends on like a ridiculous cliffhanger, and I'm just kind of, I was just in shock, and we don't even know when the third one's coming.
Oh, that's really exciting. Okay. I feel like I hear a lot about Neal Shusterman and his books, and I just haven't picked one up, so.
Yeah, I started reading his books years ago because he's got another series called Unwind, and it's all about kids who, like, parents can apply to have their kids unwind, which basically means they're like taken apart piece by piece, and their parts can go to people who need them. So it's kind of like a really extreme kind of donation system, and it's kind of like, it's really messed up, but they're amazing.
I'm just looking at the reviews now, and someone started theirs with, "This is the most disturbing book I've ever read." They gave it 5 stars though.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is disturbing, but it's amazing.
I feel like Neal Shusterman is one to read. I feel a lot of people have recommended him, not as much as you have, but I feel like I'm probably going to go with Challenger Deep first.
Yeah,
that one sounds something that I would really like, and then we'll see about Unwind. We'll see how I feel. We'll see how brave I'm feeling.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think that's a good place to end, giving a couple of good book recommendations. I need to pick up some Leigh Bardugo and also V. Schwab.
Please do. If she's sat right there on your shelf, you might as well.
It is, yeah. I don't even need to go out and buy it. It's already there. Yeah. And you need to read some Neal Shusterman.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We'll have to tell each other what we thought.
Yeah, especially with V. Schwab, just because she's so popular, and I don't think I've heard a bad word said about her books, to be honest. So I would like to know, especially from someone who doesn't really read fantasy. So that would be really interesting to hear, yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated.
Please do.
Well, it was really nice to speak to you.
And you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. You can find all of the information from this episode, including all of the things that we talked about and a little bit about today's guest, in the show notes, and they'll be at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and the links for those will also be in the show notes. And finally, if you want to chat or you've just got a burning question you want to ask about this episode or any of the others, you can pop me an email at podcast@wonderfullybookish.co.uk. See you next time.